So, Malik, we're picking up from previous discussion on
Conflict.
conflict, and we said that we wanted to look at how it is that possibly in the midst of conflict, we deal with things, or post-conflict that was possibly not resolved, how do we deal with that? So I
Exactly.
think that's what's going to round off, in many respects, our discussion from conflict resolution that we pulled out of the mind map.
So hopefully we will establish the blueprint of really healthy and fun, couples and how they manage because everyone has a conflict.
Okay, that's
And
good.
then looked at how on the opposite side as well. And then some of the red flags that we should monitor,
So
definitely.
let's see if we can hit on all of those things as we
Yes,
go.
let's go. So
Okay, so is there any particular place? Should we just take a scenario? Why don't you give us a scenario of we're having a conflict, we're in the middle
okay.
of it. Give me
Okay.
some scenario.
So let's say I came home, okay. So I expected something to be done.
Keyword.
Yes. Hasn't been done. Let's say the partner is sitting somewhere and relaxing, and you now come in, and why haven't been, why you didn't do this? And the person, oh, you're ruining the mood. You just came back to a fight. I was just relaxing. This is so it's you're never happy. So now it's moving away. So like, what do you talk? I mean, then you can see how this is rolling out. Like
Yeah.
I forgot.
It escalates.
I forgot because now he's talking about me. I have a problem, right? So it's me, it's not him. We can't even come to the point why you haven't done it because the person just immediately goes, you just came to ruin my mood. Yeah, I was in a good mood. And, you just came angry, whatever happened at work, you brought it here, so, and that is just, and the word always, never, and then you never listen, and you always are like this. And these words are triggers. They like a minefield. So you just keep stepping one on the other. And pretty much this just goes into discussion about the past relationship. And this is familiar pattern. I mean,
I was going to say, this is not foreign, huh? This
no.
I think
And
anybody could
emotions are
relate to some degree.
getting really, really high. Now you're asking, why am I with this person?
Yeah, that's not a good
You
angle.
ask, like, why am I with the person that actually had thinks about me like this? And why would I be with a person that
Well, what I
describes
love, what I love you doing right now, okay, is when you look at the mind map, we're in pursuit and preservation of maximal satisfaction. So the one lying on the couch is in pursuit of maximal satisfaction,
found it.
possibly not considering other things that were required or that one was responsible for, possibly. The other one who gets home, right, also in pursuit and preservation of maximal satisfaction, was expecting. What a key word.
Yes.
There was an expectation. The expectation was not met. So what is the natural processing in terms of thought, conscious and subconscious, when it comes to an unmet expectation? First of all, I'm not happy. There's a negative emotion, and it's accompanied by multiple question marks. As you were saying, why this? Now, the first unmet expectation is I wasn't expecting the person on the couch to have not done what they were doing. The second expectation is the person on the couch, what is this you're coming home to ruin? Now, both with question marks fill in the gaps with assumption. Now, the assumption is you're lazy. The assumption is you had a bad day. The assumptions build and form the basis for the comments that fly.
Not to mention that if a person that truly loves me wouldn't do this,
Immediately, it's building out to show the contradictions here. So the contradiction might be, if you really cared for me, as you said, you would have. And so we're constructing an argument so rapidly. Why? Because we know the person. We've been with them for a long time. This rapidly is able to say, I know that the person at times, doesn't do what they said they would do. I know the person on occasion does this. The only reason we say you always, you never is because we've been with that person enough times to know that this might be somewhat repetitive. It doesn't mean it's, every time. But the point is we're sitting immediately with a negative situation, with unmet expectation. And what typically happens is, again, it's personal. Why? To defend self and to attack the other person with the hope. Always remember, argument is how we naturally, unhelpfully, but naturally attempt to find agreement. Oh, yes, you're right. I'm always. So sometimes sarcastically, we would even say that. Yeah, it's always my fault. Of course, I mean, you're the perfect one. And,
Oh,
these things
sarcasm
can
just
go ahead.
cuts so deep.
Sarcasm. And what you realize is this can happen so
Yes.
quickly.
But there could be the swearing and insults
Yeah,
and,
that's when it
and
escalates. Now it can get
yes.
ugly. So we're talking about
Yes.
it can get uncomfortable. Now it can get ugly. So in that situation, what do we do? Well, we're
Exactly.
there,
Mm.
right? And to prevent it from getting so ugly,
And we're
which
getting
again is
very
destructive,
emotional.
there are times when people throw things, there are times when
Yes.
people get
Slam the door,
physical.
get out. Yes.
So we're looking at this and saying none of those things work out well for anybody or the surroundings. So we're looking at this and saying the point of this discussion is when conflict becomes destructive to the individual, to the relationship, these things. What we're trying to look at here is before this thing gets away from us,
Mm.
how can we put the brakes on? Now, in that situation, I would say to you that in order to have a braking system, you have to have some sort of preparation from beforehand. And what I mean by that is simply there needs to be the recognition that wherever there are two people, there are going to be differences of opinion. And whenever there's difference of opinion, it's the only thing that underlies the potential for conflict. So conflict is as inevitable as breathing, frankly, which means that we need to be prepared ahead of time. So the preparation might include, okay, when I get home, okay, we know that probably both of us have had a long day. So we are not necessarily at our best. Okay. Granted, both. Well, I could be a little bit better. Neither of us are at our best. So if we find that before we even get to greet, hi, how are you? How was your day? We're into an argument. Might a good thing be to say, and this is something that I highly recommend, pause before this gets away from us. Let's try this again. And I might even go as far as to say in this scenario, I'm going to walk out and I'm going to come in again and I'm going to try and I literally am asking for a fresh start. Both of us possibly had a role to play in that. I can't fill your role. I can only do mine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it on myself to say, I really would like us to have a wonderful evening together. I really would like this to turn out well. The way this is going right now is that's almost a given. That's not going to happen. And you know what, for what at the end of the day? So I'm going to walk out and I'm going to come in. Now I might come in with, hey, I missed you. How was your day? And then see the stuff that wasn't done and say, you know what, in the bigger scheme of things, that is probably somewhat insignificant. We can either sort that out later, but first let me establish a foundation for coming home and we are good together. And then we can have a look and say, hey, oh man, it's so good to see you. By the way, I noticed that that wasn't done. Is there is there something that happened? Is there something you can inquire? And the person, you know what, I actually totally forgot. Oh, no problem. You can take care of it. Or at that point, you have a look and see, do you offer to help? Do you say, oh, no problem, when you can get to it? Whatever the understanding of the relationship is, will usually allow for how that detail gets dealt with. Now, so the prevention, I think, is the key component for helping diffuse a potential conflict. But let's assume, or is anything you want to add to that?
I feel like this is also dependent on the other person. I mean, it's we don't explode. I mean, if I'm exploding based on one off, I mean, I clearly have an issue to look into because that just doesn't. I mean, if something happens once in a blue moon and I go around and attack the other person, I think I should really look at myself, in the mirror and ask, why am I really exaggerating something that is just not even having a frequency and indicating there is a problem. But so the other person just sits and really they did the expectations are not shared. I have high expectation. They just don't. I mean, obviously we're now fighting about something that I care. You don't.
Yeah. Which is why in that
I mean,
situation, again, we're talking about people who know each other. So we come in and we say, okay, now that we've established, using this as an example, and again, it's a simple example, but the point is we're trying to establish when we get something wrong, can we try and have a fresh start? Okay, let's
Yeah.
assume
Yeah.
so that we're using this as a strategy,
And I like that. I
right?
mean, let's say we went in halfway. We are going.
And now it's like, hang on a second, let's try that again. And personally, I would use this, and I do use it in my own life, and I've recommended it for people because it's built on this understanding. Neither of us are going to be perfect. Neither of us are going to be at our best all the time. There's a recognition that we might say something or present something in a way that is offensive, that wasn't intended to be offensive. Things could be taken in ways that are unhelpful and can, sort of derail or escalate rapidly. So what we're trying to give ourselves is margin. We're giving ourselves margin for error in many respects, which is an extension of goodwill. And if it's a bidirectional
both sides.
extension of goodwill, what we'll find is this is not then a gimmick. This is not then something that, oh, well, okay, we can start again. This is like, man, I'd really like to start that again. Because again, what's at stake
I can
here?
do better. Yeah.
And that really is going to be built on, hopefully, the understanding that this is a relationship, that we have got a common goal and we are committed to that particular goal. And we'd like to celebrate this evening rather than have conflict this evening, right? And when I say celebrate, it's just one of the ways that I would describe enjoy time together. So you have that opportunity, but you're going to have something that potentially could derail and escalate. And as you said, bring the past and bring everything into that could result in people not talking for a week or longer. And that's what we're trying to prevent here. We're trying to look at it and say, can we reduce the destructive nature of conflict? Not necessarily, can we get everybody to agree on everything? Well, that's not going to happen.
No.
And it's with that understanding that we might say this, can I have a second go at this, is a helpful way of diffusing in the situation. So if you talk about the occasions where that's heavily dependent also on the other partner, you're right. Because say I'm lying on the couch and somebody comes and says, can we do this again? And that person is completely disengaged, completely disinterested. The reason they didn't do the thing is because they really don't care. It's not important to them. And if it's so important to you, you do it. And the attitude is a dismissive one, and the attitude is an aggressive one or a completely disengaged one. Well, that's a whole other story. The recommendation I'm offering right now is not going to work. So the preparation again is there is agreement on something else that we bring into the discussion where there is now a disagreement. So the solution for any disagreement is agreement, not necessarily on the point we're disagreeing on, but something that is more important to both of us. Well, what might that be? Again, the agreement that rather than have ourselves end up in conflict is we're committed to working through that in a way that we'll apply this rule, we'll try this strategy. And in that moment, we need to be self-aware enough to see we're heading off here. And we might in that situation say, if the other person again is willing to engage because it's mutually beneficial, listen, this is really not going in the direction that I was hoping it would go. Do we agree on that? Yeah, we totally agree on that. Can we start again? I think it'd be a great idea. Agreement lays the foundation to address whatever the disagreement was. So as a principle, that's how I would frame that kind of approach. It's not the only approach, right? But I think certainly in my own life, and I think in the lives of certain people that I've worked with, it really, really is helpful because it humanizes. It really just allows us to exercise an element of patience with ourselves and with the other person. And that, again, in and of itself, just relieves so much pressure. And that is tremendously helpful in
This
dealing
is
with
interesting
conflict.
what you said. I keep thinking as you're speaking, and quite often we think the goal of the conflict is to, reach certain agreement on the topic in itself. But common goal in conflict should be preservation of trust,
Yes.
respect,
Yes. Very much so.
mutual closeness,
Yes.
intimacy.
Yes.
So anything that is going to uh, damage that, to me,
It's not worth it.
it's not worth it.
And
So
there's our agreement.
yes, and so if you think about the moment you see that is an agreement
Now
straight
that's
away,
threatened.
so that is truly the cost of
Yes.
poorly managed argument, and everything else. Honestly, we have a take two, and it's much harder to repair trust, respect once it's lost, or intimacy that is lost,
Yes.
and we see this quite often in poorly managed conflicts that ultimately that is lost. And that's what they can't anymore repair. It's not about the topics they were fighting about. It's actually completely, dismantling whatever was holding the relationship in itself. It's underneath values that every person actually expects
I
from.
love the way you're putting that, because what it's highlighting is, we could summarize it like this: the conflict that we inevitably have over small things, it's absolutely not worth what it's going to ultimately end up costing us.
Exactly.
What we can mutually agree on defending, right, is all the things you just mentioned. So if I can be mindful of the fact that small arguments, right, or small issues that become big arguments are destructive to the more important things, and I can recognize
Oh,
that,
yeah.
and we can mutually remind one another of that as we see things are starting to disrail, we can simply remind ourselves, this is honestly not worth it. It's not worth it to me. The cost is too great. Now, again, when emotions distort
Yes.
perspective, we're not necessarily thinking about the future. We're not necessarily thinking about what we, in a cool, calm, collected state, might say is more important. And that's where possibly the rules would be: if we see ourselves shouting, if we hear ourselves, if we see that there is the sort of body language or facial expression that does not reflect the kind of relationship that we want in closeness and better together, then we need to push pause right there and establish, is there something else going on? Or, can we start again? Or, this doesn't seem like it's a good time. That's actually not that important in the bigger scheme of things. Sit down with a person on the couch, say, how are you? Everything is okay? All of those little bits and pieces, there are many ways of dealing with that. So the intention here as a blueprint is not to say, go sit down, hold hands, say these words. That's not the intention. The principle is, can I show compassion? Can I be patient? Can I recognize that this thing that my emotion is really getting me so worked up about is really, again, by comparison, not that big a deal? That is also not to say nothing is important. So it's very easy for us to fall off on either side. So I'm not suggesting nothing matters anymore. No, that matters a lot to me, to which you could, in that new calm state next to the person, say, yeah, I don't want this to turn into an argument. State your intention, state your goal. But, I did come home and I was hoping, or at least expecting, that you had taken care of that as you said you would. Now, I'm sure that there's a reason, and I want to be understanding, but can I ask that is something that, you can go ahead and try and take care of? Usually in that state, the person who's being dealt with like that is likely to say, you know what, I'm sorry, I forgot, or whatever. And the person acknowledges that I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Oftentimes, the simple acknowledgement that the
Yes.
other person is saying something that is not unreasonable. It might be uncomfortable. I might not like it because it makes me have to be confronted with the idea that I didn't do what I said I would do. Or any of those kinds of things that are now, have me sitting with some sort of inconsistency. Remember, the inconsistency in the thinking, any dissonance that's there, any difference or any unmet expectation is going to create a scenario that immediately my thinking wants to resolve. My thinking wants to reconcile. And of the ways in which it does that at times is to defend myself, justify why I didn't do it. I'd had a rough day. No, forget all of that stuff if you can. Again, it isn't a big deal, but it's reflective of something that, could, again, easily derail us, which is not worth it. But it is helpful towards the very thing of a good relationship to take care of those things, because I'd really appreciate that. So there's a lot in there. There's a tremendous amount in there. But what we're trying to aim at is here pointing out, if we allow the small things, which are not nothing, to become so big that they destroy the things that are of real value to both of us, we are really not handling ourselves and what is important, as well as what we could be and probably should be. And the result is going to be to the detriment of both of us and whatever else is attached to us. That's a big deal.
So let's discuss what escalates the conflict. So we
Okay.
can discuss the blame, what kind of thinking, black and white we mentioned, quite rigid thinking,
Yeah.
um, very emotionally explosive and volatile behavior, exaggeration. Maybe we can
All
touch
of
on.
these, if you think about it, the things that you just mentioned right now, the moment a person feels attacked, which can come from all of those things, the moment a person is, you know, basically it's suggested that they are anything less than the view that they possibly already have of themselves. You're stupid, you're lazy, you're inconsiderate, whatever the label is, which is part of how we are reconciling the unmet expectation. Remember, that's what we're doing. This wasn't what I expected. This is what there was. How do I reconcile that? Laziness, stupidity, inconsiderate. That label that we often level is how our mind is revealing how we are reconciling what we were not wanting or what we were not expecting. Here's the problem. The moment we label it like that, the other person is confronted with that. And that's why we say every disagreement ultimately is personal. But we can make it super personal by turning it into a personality attack or an attack on this person's, whatever that is important to them. Could even be their things. So as we are mindful of this, we need to maybe go in with a recognition again. Conflict is destructive unless we are able to diffuse it, step back, process what's really at stake. What is this really going to cost? And is it worth me being humble enough not to have to necessarily defend myself, or caring enough not to necessarily attack the other person, and thoughtful enough to be able to say, these small things, again, as I say for about the third or fourth time, are not worth fighting over and destroying what is so much more important. Again, that kind of discussion assumes, as we said before, a commitment, a common goal, a genuine care, a genuine compassion, a self-awareness, situational awareness, and others' awareness. Everything that we say in Perspective for Life, in many respects, keep it thoughtful.
Which translates into language of respect and care. And that's very
Absolutely.
important. I mean, the
Yeah.
people are listening to the language that you choose to convey your message. And
Yeah.
obviously, so it's interesting how this quite quickly, and this is what I wanted to come back. So what should we monitor at the very beginning? Because obviously that's where you can catch, and it's easier to kind of turn this around. What do you do when you're super emotional? Talk about yourself. Like you're really escalating. You really feel the emotions are flooding you. And what is the moment you should do? And what can you do about yourself? Because
That's all
that's
you
the
can
real
do.
person you can
Yeah.
control in the argument is truly self. And then what do you do? And we're gonna address this. Obviously, at one point, things are so bad,
Yeah.
people leave. Like literally, there's no point. There is also those, and the fights can be so nasty that someone leaves, slams the door, that's done. Or there's so many insults were thrown that no one wants to listen anymore,
Yes.
and then leave. So the question is really what after, because the
Yes.
collateral damage that carries is crazy. I mean, we're talking about we attack the trust, the respect, and all of this that holds the relationship in such a fight. So let's go back. So beginning, what should I watch for, and
What I would look
what
out.
kind of effective tools can I have there?
Right. So it requires then a sensitivity. In other words, I need to be attentive to what? Well, how am I feeling? If I'm starting to feel, I'm starting to feel angry, I'm starting to feel scared, I'm starting to feel whatever it might be, I need to know, well, where are these feelings coming from? So an awareness of myself in terms of feeling. What else? Awareness of my body language, awareness of my tone, awareness of the sharpness of what I'm saying, awareness of the other person. I can't tell what they're feeling, but emotions typically express themselves. And I want to be attentive to how is this person, presenting themselves with the same things that I've just listed. If I see that in either one of us, the more quickly I can tend to that, the better. So those would be the kinds of things that I would say to you would be the markers that what is a disagreement, which again, a disagreement can be had without conflict, but a disagreement is now starting to result in sort of a mind-body response, a feeling that is gearing me up to do something. And whether that do is to attack or defend or flee, whatever it is, it's probably not gearing me up to calm things down, to have a discussion.
It's interesting. I'm going to add something. I listened recently to someone who, it was just a podcast that I was listening, and the suggestion was that you use the language in your favor and to disassociate, almost distance yourself. So use like, I notice I am.
Mm.
And it's amazing. You literally notice the fact that you embed I notice, not the other person is doing this. No, I am noticing that the other,
Yeah.
I am thinking that the other. And then you realize, okay, I have a choice now. I am
Yeah.
thinking, I am noticing. So what am I going to do about it? And it's also like there's a little buffer zone from quickly rushing into,
Yes.
reaction rather than being responsive and more responsible toward what you're going to say. So it's amazing how powerful language can be just in our own self-reflection.
So those things would be super helpful in tying in with what we're saying, which leads into the what do I do with that?
Yes.
So what do I do with that? Well, in many respects, again, what one typically does is one either attacks or one flees. Those are the typical things if one is not sitting down and saying, let's reason together. Okay. So what can you do if you notice yourself in that situation? Well, sometimes just say it. I'm actually really starting to feel uncomfortable. I'm really, really not happy with where this is going. Or it really seems to me, I love that as a part of communication, which ties in with what you were saying. It seems to me that this is upsetting you. And then you bring in, again, what is my overarching goal for this relationship? I'm looking for agreement. That is so, so important. You seem to be getting upset. Now you can use that to stir the argument. Oh, is this upsetting you?
Okay.
Right? No, the intention here is you seem to be getting upset, and the last thing that I really want to do right now is upset you. So I'd really, should we put this down or whatever follows in terms of.
So that's at the very beginning.
That's as early as possible, right? You want to try and communicate that I'm sensing that this is not going in the direction that would be good for us.
Well, I love what you said on one of the occasions that, and we discussed, is that monitoring yourself, that you said something in a way that you wish you could say it again.
Yes.
You actually can. You can say,
you can.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
take two. I mean, like we discussed this. Can I start again? Can I, actually, that didn't come up well. And I would really love you to say it better in a way that doesn't upset you, in a way that doesn't, and you can. At the very beginning, you have so much space for that.
Sometimes it's even helpful in that situation to label yourself, even a little sarcastically, the way the other person might be thinking. And this is, again, an intimate relationship.
Yes.
So I might say, if I'm saying, hey, listen, I'm such a football. It's just a silly way of saying, I'm a knucklehead.
You're deflating.
It's the way I handled that situation was really not great. So to be able to say, I'm owning that, I'm acknowledging that. So allow me a second chance is what I'm asking.
Yeah, there's a self-compassion and compassion toward the other person.
Exactly. So I think that if handled well can diffuse if, again, there is commitment to a common goal and a care for the other person and a genuine care for the relationship that says, I'm not willing to allow small things to become massively destructive. Small things feel big when I'm tired, when I'm irritated, when the emotions stir, when there's repetition, when there is all these things, when it's not going the way I expected. So right the way you started out, that keyword expectation. How do I manage expectation? Keep it real. In other words, try and be realistic as possible so that you are better prepared for what might come. So let's assume now the situation, none of that has worked. We've forgotten to go ahead and ask for a second chance.
Things are ugly.
The door is slammed. The picture frames are on the floor. Everything's so smashed. The animals, the pets have run off to who knows where, and the person gets, they're leaving. They storm out, right? What do we do then? Is there a preventive approach that we could have in place for that? And I think yes. You might say there might be times when I, am so fed up, when I'm so angry that I've just left. Okay, that is something that we need to commit. We're not going to allow that to linger. In other words, it went completely beyond what we would ever want. Whatever the specifics or the details were, we want to try and reconcile as soon as we are both in a position to try and have that conversation again in a better way. That might be an hour, that might be a day, probably not a week or a month. But I think recognizing that there's been some time just to cool off with a
So how do you
commitment.
prepare for that conversation? Because there's a danger of literally continuing what you just
Correct. So that's part of
experienced.
the preparation. If ever that had to happen, then let's commit to, as I say, coming together as quickly as possible. Well, as soon as you feel that I can resume this conversation and not take it personally and not make it more personal, and I check in with the other person, somebody's going to initiate somewhere.
Yes.
And there is a willingness to say, let's both be committed to initiate as soon as we feel that we are ready. And then you can inquire with the other person. I think I'm ready to pick up where we sort of, where we left off. Are you in a position where you could possibly do that with me?
What's the goal of this? I mean, and what, obviously there's now a language that you shouldn't introduce
Yes.
back.
Yes.
What kind of, this is really important what you say. And what is the goal of this? And where do we come back? And how do you find that agreement again without picking on details again?
Such a good point. Because if it's not resolved, what's going to happen is it's going to linger, and we're
Yes.
going to basically complete the picture as we think it needs to be completed through assumption, through defense, through attack. And we're going to arrive at a position in our own thinking, and the other person is going to arrive at a position in their own thinking, and we're probably not even going to recall the same thing the same way
That's
the
very
next
true.
day or whatever else. So the point is, it's with that sort of recognition that we are committed to saying, where I have gotten my part wrong, I'm willing to own it. So as we get back together, maybe what we do is we say, the first thing is, let's state again our intention. Our intention is to try and get this, to work this out, not to defend a position. Our intention is to keep this thing together, to know that there is a reality that we can work through difficult things, even difficult things that there were slammed doors and broken things, that we can reconcile to a point where things are better than they were before. That is possible. And that's what we should strive for. It's not always going to happen. There might be times when the other person might not be willing to work in that particular kind of way, where one is going to have to accept that that person now is clinging to something that I said, and they can't let go no matter how much I've apologized, no matter how much I've said, I didn't mean it like that. As we've said before, I think we're completely capable of saying things and exaggerating things beyond what we intend when we're in that state. Now, I also think it's possible for us to intend certain things, say ugly things, and then try and reduce the fallout by saying, I didn't mean it like that. This is where openness and honesty is so important and foundational to a good, solid relationship, because it's those things that we can trust. It's the respect, and it's all those other things in terms of value and common goal, and the things that we have in terms of what we have as shared experience that form the foundational parts of the agreement that we share to navigate the disagreement and the hurt of the conflict that we're basically currently suffering. So it really is, I think, a matter of principally a willingness to acknowledge where I got it wrong, to ask the other person in many respects to apologize as a part of that owning up, and asking the other person, please, I'm asking you not to hold it against me. In other words, again, please forgive me. And when there is a mutual, genuine, authentic forgiveness, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden those pains are gone. What it means is I'm not held back, but I'm actually released to
You're
be able
back
to
in
walk
present.
forward
Yeah.
with you to go ahead and figure out what is more important to us and turn our attention to the things that are genuinely, meaningfully valuable. And that, I think, is foundational. So if you ask me what is at the heart of a great relationship, I would say the capacity to resolve conflict on the basis of common goal, commitment to good communication, commitment to wanting to enjoy things with this person, commitment to sacrificing myself, my time, my energy, all of these things, all the things we know that are required to make for what we would term a safe relationship, a great relationship, all things that basically are massively demanding. But when we consider relationships as better together, massively worth it.
Okay, so ultimate prevention is choose your partner better.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good
It's like,
point.
I think,
But
knowing how costly it
how?
is. Okay,
How?
so and this is what we were off the camera, we were discussing, right?
Maybe we should pick this up on the next one.
How
Okay,
to
the
choose
ultimate prevention, if there is such a thing,
choose a
how to
partner.
choose a good partner. I like that. Let's do
I
it on the
like
next
that.
one.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.